when you, as a director, feel like you've made this production or you've tried to make this production and the company has kind of railroaded your original vision and they've made you turn it into something completely different than what you had. And so I supported that idea. Um, but at the same time, I think it was Mom that originally said this first with the whole idea of that we learn from our mistakes and grow from them. I don't know if using Alan Smithee negates that necessarily and the accountability that goes with putting your name onto something. Hello and welcome to the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Chasen, and like always, I'll be joined today by the great team that brings you cupofteacritiques.com. We are excited to get started on our podcast where we will share our perspectives on several areas in movies and television. At Cup of Tea Critiques, we review movie and television series and tag them with a tea brew that evokes a feel for the production. In this way, you can decide for yourself if they're your cup of tea. Here on the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast, we will dive even deeper into the productions and topics we broach on our website, engaging in conversation and sharing our unique perspectives. Ready for a deep look with the deep brew? This week's topic, Alan Smithee. So let's get started. Cup of Tea Critiques is a family business, and I'm here with my brother Chris, my mother Reba, and my father Terry. And Chris, you're actually the one that introduced us to Alan Smithee. So why don't you do us a favor and tell us who he is?
Yeah, so in 1969, the production of a Western with a kind of a middling budget called Death of a Gunfighter.
Death of a Gunfighter. We don't have any law in this jerkwater town. He's the law. Come get me, Frank. This gunfighter lived by the law of the gun.
You know, it started to shoot, and the director's name was Robert Totten. When they got most of the way through the shoot, he wasn't really happy with how it was going. He wasn't pleased with some of the creative choices that he was kind of being forced to make, and he bowed out of the project. And Don Siegel took over and finished out the project. And he didn't really want his name on a project that he'd worked on a small portion of, essentially. And so he didn't really want to be credited as the director. Neither did Robert Totten. And so Robert Totten petitioned the Directors Guild of America to put a pseudonym in place of his name in the credits. And that pseudonym was initially Alan Smith, which they decided was a little too common of a name. And so they changed it to Alan Smithee eventually, because it was plain enough but not too common, essentially. So moving forward, Alan Smithee just became a common pseudonym for directors to petition to the Directors Guild of America to place on a movie when they weren't satisfied with some of the creative choices that were made with the influence of the production company, you know, that had backed the film, you know, which so often it ended up being placed on TV edits that were that cut down for a 2-hour runtime, you know, including commercials, or an in-flight entertainment type of edit cut down again to 2 hours and maybe had some material removed to make it more digestible. And so it just kind of became a regular thing for made for TV movies, for movies that weren't very good, for movies that were being edited into different versions and directors weren't really happy with and didn't want their name on. And so it kind of continued for about 3 decades. One of the most notable movies that had Alan Smithee on it was Dune in 1984.
Shield practice.
Shield practice? Gurney, we had practice this morning. I'm not in the mood.
Not in the mood. Mood's a thing for cattle and love play, not fighting.
I'm sorry, Gurney.
Which people know it by the very successful remakes now, but the 1984 version was directed by David Lynch, who wasn't very happy with it because, again, that was another movie that had an almost 4-hour runtime. He worked to get it down to 3, and they said, no, we want it to be like 2. And so he wasn't happy with the final product either. It was ripped by critics. The So they wanted to put Alan Smithee on that one. Another one that almost ended up with the name Alan Smithee on it was American History X.
I don't know. There's some things that don't fit.
Well, that happens. Look, Derek, you are too damn smart to be floating around here pretending you don't see all the holes in this shit.
Hey, listen, you know what? I said I was confused. I didn't say I didn't believe in it.
Which is maybe the most critically acclaimed movie that almost ended up in this batch of movies, because the director Tony Kaye did not get along with the lead actor Edward Norton, and eventually he went on this kind of press tour. Essentially, he kept basically publicizing it to everybody. So when he petitioned for the DGA to put Alan Smithee as a director, they said, no, we've already basically told everybody you work on it, so no. So Tony Kaye didn't actually get his name removed from it, and it ended up being praised by critics anyway. And then the title, the pseudonym Alan Smithee, kind of took a big hit, and this was basically the beginning of the end. A movie in 1997, a movie called An Alan Smithee Film, Burn Hollywood Burn, was released, which starred people such as Coolio, Chuck D, Naomi Campbell.
If Alan Smithee wanted to direct another film himself sometime, I would hire him in a heartbeat. He has demonstrated his integrity, and the possessory credit on the movie An Alan Smithee Film would mean more now than Tom Cruise or Jim Carrey. Alan Smithee has redeemed Alan Smithee.
And then the title character was played by Eric Idle, and the title character was Alan Smithee, a guy who was assigned to direct a movie, wasn't happy with it, wanted his name removed, but couldn't have Alan Smithee put on it because his name was Alan Smithee. And so he goes about trying to basically burn the film, and the production company tries to stop him. And hilarity ensues, except it wasn't considered very, very funny by critics. Roger Ebert slammed it, said it was terrible. You can find Siskel and Ebert's review of it on YouTube today, actually. And ironically, so the writer of the film, Joe Esterhaus, did not really see eye to eye with the director, Arthur Hiller. They were kind of oil and water, and Arthur Hiller wanted his name removed. Arthur Hiller successfully got Alan Smithee's name put on there. From an Alan Smithee film, Burn Hollywood Burn, to replace with Alan Smithee. And so art imitating life and vice versa, I guess. But that was kind of the end of that pseudonym, the unofficial ending of that pseudonym, now that everybody knew about it. So that's a little bit of the history of the name Alan Smithee. There's plenty more stories, but for time, that's just the gist of it.
Okay, so I found so much of that fascinating. Dad, it sounds like you wanted to make a comment.
No, I was just going to say I thought it was funny that Roger Ebert gave it a 0, which was a very rare thing for him to do with any movie, but it just shows you how bad he thought it was.
Yeah, I Siskel and Ebert, very famous critics of movies, and so I didn't get to watch that whole thing, and I didn't get a chance to see this movie either from 1997, but I did have some skepticism as to why he gave it such a low rating, because it was putting on blast the situation in Hollywood. And I almost wondered, was he pointed in that direction, like, hey, don't give this film any love. Hopefully it goes away. But, ultimately it didn't, obviously. And it was large enough that we realized we had to do away with Alan Smithee. So one thing about this topic, though, with Alan Smithee, when I was reading about this and we were discussing it, the question comes across, have you in your own personal life had any type of Alan Smithee moments where you wanted to just have your name removed from something, whether it's like from a project, from Chris, you're even talking like from a terrible sport team or something like that. So the question is like, have you had an Alan Smithee moment? And with that in mind, I'll start real quick first. Like, I am a very proud White Sox fan, and 2024, I really wish I could remove my name from that, because it is the worst. It's the worst season in history. and I can't remove that from my friends' memories that I'm a fan because last year happened. But that would be my Alan Smithee moment for myself. I'll start with you guys, Mom and Dad. What about you guys? Have you had an Alan Smithee moment in your life?
Yeah, I do. I wrote a high school research paper that was poorly written very early in my freshman year of college. I went back and read that and saw how poorly written it was. And I just wanted to bury my head under a cover and never come out. So I know it sounds obsessive, but yeah, it was just terribly, terribly written. And I was just really pissed off at my senior English teacher that she could ever pass me on that paper and that she never taught me to write any better than that. By the time I got to college, I was writing much better, and I was just pissed. But anyway, that's mine.
So real quick, Dad, before you give yours, I want the audience out there to know that my mother is a wonderful writer now, which you should know by going to cupofteacritiques.com and checking out any of the critiques that she has wonderfully written. But I can also attest firsthand that she's a good writer because if I take away my sports fandom example, my mother helped me avoid an Alan Smithee moment. I will always remember this paper going way back to 4th grade. I wrote a paper about the kangaroo rat where let's just say that first off, I didn't understand how bad plagiarism was, as well as didn't do a good job of understanding how to discern any kind of information. So I wrote what probably amounted to like an 8 or 10 page completely plagiarized paper that did not have any direction whatsoever. And by the time I actually turned it in, it was a much better, succinct piece that actually made some sense, and I cited the people that I got the information from. So, and from then I had a lot of great, grades on my written work, and that started with my mother working on that. So, Mom, you no longer write bad papers since that senior year. You write some pretty good works, and thankfully you've helped me write some pretty good stuff as well. So, all right, go ahead, Dad. What's your example?
Oh no, my example is just from days of coaching sports. There's moments that I wish I could kind of take back, and those are my Alan Smithee moments. Not a lot, but enough that you just go, oh, I wish I could take that back.
You have to be specific.
No.
Can you give us an example of like a decision that you wish you could take back?
No, because anyone listening that has any knowledge of it would know exactly what I'm talking about.
All right, bro, you got one of your own?
Yeah, when I was in 3rd grade, I did a science fair project, a group science fair project, where we had to make. Well, we didn't have to make this; we just chose to do this. We made atomic models of different, atom combinations, and we used Play-Doh and toothpicks, to show what water looked like and all these other different substances. And so the night of the science fair, the other two people on the project didn't show up, so I was just standing at a table with crumbling Play-Doh and toothpicks, and Sharpie next to it, and a big one of those big trifold poster boards with some letters on it. So I was just standing there with these lame looking Play-Doh models. And I was never a good science student, so I didn't really know. Not that anybody stopped me to ask anything, but I wouldn't have known exactly how to describe them beyond the one with the 2 hydrogens and the oxygen is water, if you didn't know. And that's about all I had. That was about 2 hours of my 8-year-old life. And not only would I like those back, but I would like to put Alan Smithee in place of that.
So
I'm sorry,
so
Chris.
for the Cup of Tea Critiques crew, though.
That's about all we can do with my stuff. I can't believe this shit. I can't believe this. Did you get a free toaster with this too?
Our regrets clearly go way back in time. So Alan Smithee, Elise, and it sounds like for all of us, those actual true ones predate the 1997 movie. So we should have been able to use it in those cases. So, but if you want nicely written works, make sure you go to cupofteacritiques.com. I'm telling you, none of those are Alan Smithee worthy at all. They're much better with what we got going on. So with that in mind, though, again, as we kept going through this topic, one thing that struck me was they were allowed to put Alan Smithee on a finished work. And that is very weird to me that something can be completely done and all of a sudden you want to say, I don't want to be tied to it. And that's different. Now, based on our research, I have my own opinion on if something should have that opportunity. But let me pose this to the group. Do you agree with directors, or for that matter, any position in entertainment, having the ability to use a pseudonym after a production has been completed? Do you guys agree with that?
I'm on the fence about it. I am on the fence about it. I'll be honest about that. On the one hand, I feel that there are lessons that can be learned from the things that we do poorly. I think that, in the end, we're ultimately judged by the body of our work. Most of those things will be good, hopefully, and only a few of those things will be bad. And of those things that are bad, my hope is that we have learned from that and gradually improved. That's how I see that. So, producing something that's bad does not necessarily make you somebody who can't, accomplish something further down the line. So that is why I don't think it's, good necessarily that someone should be able to just cover up their work and pretend like it's something that, I cannot own. That's just one way of looking at that. On the other hand, though, I think about the podcast we did on movie ratings. And in that podcast, there were a lot of complaints from directors and not being able to control the ratings of their films. And I think directors in this case use Alan Smithee to basically say, look, I did not have control over my final work. And because of that, I don't want to have to claim it. And the Directors Guild say, okay, you don't have to claim it. They effectively gave them Alan Smithee as an out. And so it's just a way for them to be able to control their work. And to some degree, I understand that. So, and that's why I'm on the fence about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not on the fence at all about it. Why should anyone, directors in particular, be allowed to remove their names from a work that they're involved in? They got paid for the project. They were in it from not necessarily start to finish, because we know sometimes things get interrupted, but you worked on the project. I mean, the actors are part of the project. They don't get to easily remove their names from it. They live with the fact that, yeah, I was in a bad production. I don't think they should be able to run away from the finished product because they don't agree with the finished product.
Okay, so I want to, Chris, before you respond, I do want to follow up with you, Dad. You mentioned particularly the financial piece. And one thing about the use of Alan Smithee was that, and if I understood this correctly, they were supposed to completely disassociate themselves with this production, which I took to mean that also any of the extra residuals or whatever they were no longer getting as well. But if you're saying that your issue, or you called out the piece that they got paid for it, if there was some sort of financial penalty, say like half payment or something like that, would it change your opinion on the use of the moniker?
I don't know. I just don't think they should run away from the fact that they were involved in the project. It's to your mother's point on some of it, it's a learning experience. In a previous podcast, Chris said one of the things that you learn working on a project is compromise, or things aren't going to go your way 100%. You're not going to get everything you want in it. And I just think that this kind of falls into that same category, is that, you live with the experience. It's okay. I was part of a project that didn't go well.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to you. What about you? What is your opinion on the use of the moniker?
I think I'm leaning no, it's not a good thing. Um, on the one hand, I do understand how if you're worried that a bad experience isn't going to just remain a bad experience and it's going to follow you around and greatly inhibit your ability to make a living beyond it. I do see why you'd be tempted to throw a pseudonym on there when it's because of choices that were outside of your control. Um, but just in the more abstract sense, I do think you should just kind of own your L's. You know, if you signed on to the movie knowing someone else was going to have input, you didn't think you were going to have final say, you know, altogether. You know, any kind of creative knows that the business side of things is going to come in and that they're going to have to, you know, they're going to have to figure out a way to package it and to make it digestible or to make it able to be distributed in certain realms. And so if you know that going in, you know, why sign the contract, take the money, and then try to wipe your hands of it?
Yeah. I mean, I understand using pseudonyms maybe in certain instances where maybe you weren't paid for the project. It was something you did as trying to help out a work, and maybe you want the focal point to be on others, new actors that are breaking in this project or whatever. I can maybe understand using a pseudonym in a case like that where you don't want to draw the attention to yourself.
You guys have me pondering this a little bit differently now, and I'm trying to figure out if I lean one way more than the other, or if it's dissuaded me from the way I was originally feeling and leaning. You know, this topic in general, oddly enough, made me think, you know, I'm a big sports guy as well. And so during pre-production, I talked about this comparison to being this happened in the NFL a lot, where a lot of the head coaches wanted to become GMs because the old adage of, if you want me to cook the meal, you should allow me to shop for the groceries. And in that dynamic, GMs, especially in the past, would typically get the players for the roster and tell the coach, here's what you got, go make it work. And as we've learned over time, you have to have the players that fit your philosophies in order to have, so at least hopefully have the best success. And so with that in mind, I very much understood the reason for the use of Alan Smithee. When you, as a director, feel like you've made this production or you've tried to make this production and the company has kind of railroaded your original vision and they've made you turn it into something completely different than what you had. And so I supported that idea. But at the same time, I think it was Mom that originally said this first, with the whole idea of that we learn from our mistakes and grow from them. And I agree that all of that to be true. I don't know if using Alan Smithee negates that necessarily, and the accountability that goes with putting your name onto something, but this is something that was only granted by the Directors Guild. And if you have directors that are not a part of this guild, then they don't have those same protections. They're forced to put their names on the stuff. And so I was thinking about those in particular when I said that, like, yeah, you should be able to put your name on here, because those ones that can't be a part of the guild are probably lesser known, have not had as many opportunities. And maybe this production they're a part of, this was supposed to be their big break. And if, because they don't have the same connections or the same cachet as the bigger names, that their works get railroaded, it would really stink to put it out there and it turns out it's a bad production and they didn't even get the opportunity to really put out the product that they had attempted to put together, you know, for whatever various reasons. So I guess I land on, yeah, I think that something like this should be something there because it at least holds accountable both sides. But I also like that at least the guild, you had to petition for it. It wasn't just an outright like, hey, I don't like this, so put Alan Smithee on it. You had to get permission in order to use this. And so from that standpoint, yes, I agree with the use of Alan Smithee myself. You guys, any rebuttals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, Brandon. I think all the points everyone's made have been fair points. I guess it concerns me that, you know, the degree to which we let, in general, and this is just a general point, the degree to which we let our failures define us. I think that's problematic. I think there's this tendency to define ourselves by just everything we do. With our wins, we're very happy to define ourselves as winners. With our losses, we wind up defining ourselves as losers. And I think both are especially problematic. We are who we are, and we are a culmination of our wins and our losses. What we should be doing is constantly trying to just become better versions of ourselves. And I know that's a cliche, but that's truly what we're all trying to do. And so I think the Alan Smithee pseudonym is effectively a cop-out. While I understand where it's coming from in terms of them wanting some semblance of control over their work, it does effectively act as a cop-out. Instead, what they should do is, okay, all right, so F this one up. Let me just move forward and learn from this. Next time I'm going to build, a certain clause in my contract, or next time I won't work with this particular personality type. Or next time I'm going to suggest, the film be edited is this way. Whatever that is, you learn from it, and then you move forward. And as you go forward as a filmmaker, you're going to be building your team in a more perfect way than you did the time before. So learn from your mistakes and move forward. But I'll let your dad jump in here.
I think an analogy would be a group project where, because this is kind of what a film is a group project. There's a group project and you wind up with a bad grade. That kind of lends itself more towards this. And someone says, well, yeah, you know what? You got a bad grade. You were part of this project, but we're going to allow you to take your name off of it. So it's not going to count against your grade.
Maybe that is a good comparison. I feel like what directors are concerned with attaching their name to these products is that if it's early enough in their career and it's a dud that they didn't even have any control over, now they've been branded as somebody that can't really put a film together properly. And that might be the only opportunity that they get, or at least their only opportunity on the scale that this production was supposed to be on. So I could understand why they would want that anonymity if they didn't agree with the direction it took when it was taken out of their hands. I'm empathetic to the idea of being allowed some creative license to put something together and then being told, no, we don't want that. We're going to make you do it this way instead. So unless that production company states clearly exactly the type of production they want and the director on their end decides to just blow past their instructions, then yeah, I agree with the production company taking over at that point, and the director should have to sit with it. But there definitely should be some sort of contractual situation there that holds both pieces accountable in that sense. So I think that's what I want most importantly there. Alan Smithee, to me, in general, represents accountability, and that piece of it, no matter what side of the fence we land on, that's the part that I like.
I think maybe it represents power too. Maybe to directors, it's the only card they have to play because they are conceding, look, I'm the artist. I have to bend to the will of management of the business side of things. And the only real card I have to play is to remove my name, that they get to really do what they want with it. It's like saying all you have is your name, kind of, or not your name.
Should the screenwriter be afforded the same kind of thing? They wrote the screenplay one way and
they are held accountable. That's why a bunch of them end up getting removed from a project. I mean, not to try and be a jerk here, but Blade has gone through like 19 different writers and we haven't seen a production yet. And the original script, I know they got rid of it, and I don't know the person's name right in this moment, but I know that a lot of it had to do with the talent in the movie not liking the script. It was so, in their minds, poorly written. And so there's plenty of time between the writing of the film and the production of the film. That's why they don't get afforded that same opportunity, because a script has to be chosen before they can even go forward. So that won't be the same situation. They won't ever have to worry about that.
A writer, a lot of times writers are selling a script. So sometimes you're selling a script and you have no control over what happens after it. And you are handing over the rights to it.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously writers will work out deals where they get to keep some control of that. You know, you see authors do that sometimes when their stuff gets adapted or something like that. Like, oh, I want to be in on the process, but in, you know, a writer would have an awful lot of nerve to sell it, you know, full on sell it, and then be like, wait a minute, you didn't do what I wanted with it. It's like, well, you gave it to me. It's not yours anymore.
Exactly. I'm 100% with you on that, bro. I mean, if you sold it at that point, it's somebody else's property. They get to do whatever they want to with it. So just can't find the same comparison point. Do you about to say something?
No, I was just going to say that I don't think it's that far of a stretch. I mean, director's work, to your point, it's a completed project. It goes into editing or whatever. Again, ultimately, I think the editor is responsible for the final product in that respect.
I mean, look, none of us own the means of productions. We don't control our own work. Unless you control your own work, you can forget it. You're always going to have issues with the final product. There's going to be something there. And the bottom line is directors are contracted with studios to direct a project. There is going to be some influence that the studio or someone else on the team, whether it's editing, whatever it is going to be shaping that final product. And so the idea that what comes out at the end is going to be 100% purely the director's vision is just a pipe dream. That's just not the case. And so as you brought up, Terry, there's some compromise. There has to be some room, some give and take in this process.
So I want to move this forward real quick to one more question, but I will say, Chris, now that I know Steven Soderbergh's pseudonyms, I've decided that mine will now be, and Mom and Dad, I won't put you on blast specifically, but just know that it'll be Brandon and then Dad's middle name, Mom's maiden name. So if y'all can figure those out, that's what my pseudonym would look like. So, but I won't make that for public consumption. You guys are gonna have to search for that one. So I got one last question though for the panel today. So, you know, it was interesting, Chris, because we started this off with you defining Alan Smithee, letting us understand what that name, you know, the origin of this name. And in order to do so, you actually had to list the people who started this trend, like how Alan Smithee became the pseudonym for anonymity anyways. But given today's day and age, you know, not only just with the internet, but with like new media deals, the streaming services and everything, do we even think having a pseudonym like that could even exist today? Or should everybody just kind of take the acceptance of the fact that this is going to be their work? Do we think this could even work today?
I think the secret won't stay secret for long. You know, the secret won't stay secret for very long. I just think today you got Reddit boards, you got all these circles, all these spaces where fans can congregate, where you know, different people with different insights, maybe different levels of access can, you know, spill the beans essentially. So I feel like any union is going to have a tough time keeping things in house. I mean, to illustrate the importance of that, as I mentioned, American History X, you had a director running around telling everybody he hated his lead actor, and that was enough to get him not to be able to do that. So that kind of illustrates how much you needed privacy, you needed a little bit of closed lips for this mechanism to even work out at that point in time. So I just think now it would be very hard if that was the only motive behind it. But there's also the possibility that a director's not just taking his name off it so that nobody knows that he was on it. Maybe he's taking his name off of it to signify how disgruntled he was with the final product in terms of his level of creative control. So it may be a signifier of just how the director feels, more so than whether or not he actually worked on it.
I think it means something to people who produce things that thing that is published not bear their name if they don't want it to bear their name. It doesn't matter that all the talk on social media indicates that everybody knows the truth. That doesn't matter. That's not official, though. when you go to IMDb or somebody has the DVD, as long as their name is not stamped on that, that's what they want. That is what they care about. And so, yeah, I think an Alan Smithee could exist today, despite social media, despite the way news works in social media. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If the purpose is to put that thought forth, then yeah, it works today as it worked then. In terms of anonymity, no. I think that, to Chris's point, and what we talked about in pre-production, a lot of this stuff is done so much in advance of a release of something. The director's name is put out there, who's going to be in it. There's all this marketing work that pushes all these things forward. So it's kind of hard to, at the end, go, nope, that wasn't me. I mean, you can't do Shaggy.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, I mean, just take the movie that kind of ended it all. Alan Smithee, Burn, Hollywood Burn. He's so committed to that idea. He tried to destroy the film itself. And for anyone who's curious and would like to see it themselves, I think you can rent it for $4 on Prime. But Caitlin Amber, who hosts the Tinsel Factory of Film History podcast, Burn, Hollywood Burn is not a good film. Probably not worth $4, and you might not get through the whole thing. So, suit yourself. So,
that's hilarious. And that's where we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Thanks so much for listening and figuring out your cup of tea along with us. Honestly, we could go on and on like we do at our dinner table, but we look forward to you joining us again next week for another great discussion. Make sure you rate and follow the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Got an Alan Smithee moment of your own? Leave a comment and share it with us. You can stay in the loop on all things COTC by subscribing on our website at cupofteacritiques.com. You can also find us on Facebook, check out our Instagram at Cup of Tea Critiques, and on Letterboxd at COT Critiques. For Reba, Terry, and Chris, I'm Brandon. We'll see you next week for another deep look with a deep brew.